what I would argue is that Denis Rancourt took more of an anti-racist approach than did Professor Joanne St. Louis as a black professor, because his approach was to expose the university for their corruption and their systemic racism.
That's Hazel Gashoka, a former student at the University of Ottawa. She was commenting on a case that pits free speech against, well, universities protecting their reputation. Denis Rancourt, a former physics professor at the University of Ottawa, is accused of libeling a law professor at the same university. In his 2011 blog post, Rancourt suggested that his colleague, Joanne Lewis, acted as, and I quote, a house Negro in response to her evaluation of a student report on racism. She concluded that there wasn't evidence of racism in the university's academic fraud process, so Professor Rancourt alleged that she was faulty and biased and was part of the university's attempt to minimize the issue of racism. So she's suing him, and the university is paying for the whole lawsuit. Well, at least her side of it. I say again, one University of Ottawa professor is suing another University of Ottawa professor, and her lawsuit is being paid for by the University of Ottawa. It will not surprise you to learn that this university is being run by Alan Rock, a lawyer and the former Liberal Justice Minister, known for his vicious partisan battles. The Ontario Civil Liberties Association is demanding that the University of Ottawa stop financing this bickering lawsuit against Rancourt. Joseph Hickey, Executive Director of the Ontario Civil Liberties Association, joins us with more now from Ottawa. Joseph, welcome to the show. Boy, this is a complicated case, but basically it comes down to two professors quarreling and the university deciding to bankroll one of them to sue the other. Am I right?
That's right. It's complicated. There have been about 30 interlocutory motions, and it's gone to the Supreme Court in two different ways. But in another sense, it's very simple, because it's about an article on a blog that a critic of the university published, and that's led to a $1 million lawsuit entirely financed by a public institution.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I don't like defamation law. I like it less all the time. I'm constantly sued for rough things I say, and I believe in freedom of speech. Was that the worst thing said by Professor Rancourt, calling Professor St. Louis a house Negro? Was that the stinging part of it?
That's right. The lawsuit is entirely about that.
So,
that is the
I mean, a house Negro, that's a rough thing to say. I know what that phrase means. It was in the age of slavery in the United States, a slave that got to work in the house of the master, so had an easier life than the field slaves, and the field slaves resented the house slaves because they would take the master's side. So I can understand the stinging nature of that word, but for God's sakes, it's an opinion, and we have a 3-year, $1 million lawsuit about it. Joseph, I got a question for you. There's no chance that this lawsuit would exist if it weren't being paid for by Alan Rock, would it? I mean, there's no way a professor would harbor this grievance and grudge and come up with this money on her own if it weren't paid for by Alan Rock. Am I right?
Well, it's certainly our opinion that no, it wouldn't, and that the University of Ottawa is essentially trying to silence one of its critics. And so it's public money being used to silence criticism. It's, in a sense, a cash cow for the lawyers who are profiting off of political incorrectness. And we can see how menacing that's becoming in our society if this lawsuit basically means that we can't look to Malcolm X, who is one of the leaders and great thinkers of the civil rights era.
Oh, that's a great point. Malcolm X, I mean, I disagree with many of the things he said, but he would use blunt language, calling people a house slave or a house Negro. And, I mean, he would essentially be sued into the ground. That's what bugs me here. This is not a private lawsuit between two people, which would be odious enough. But the fact that a government institution takes taxpayers' money, takes donations to the university that are meant to go to scholarships or teachers or textbooks, and takes $1 million to silence some guy. I don't even know who's right or wrong. I mean, maybe he was mean, but for God's sakes, it shouldn't be against the law in Canada to say something mean if you're in a passionate debate, should it?
That's right, and you have to be able to have insult if you're going to have free expression. We need to have a variety of views, debate, discussion, ridicule, satire, and the university is the last place that that debate should be silenced by $1 million litigation.
You know, I was involved with the University of Ottawa a few years ago. I helped bring Ann Coulter to Canada to speak there, and they shut her down. They literally shouted her down, and campus security did nothing. And at the threat of violence that was actually encouraged, in my opinion, by Alan Rock, who approved of a threatening legal letter against Ann Coulter, the student maniacs went wild, shut the place down. I think the University of Ottawa is developing a reputation as a censorious place, a litigious place, and a place that rewards bullying. And I think a fish rots from the head down. I think this is Alan Rock's own personality oozing through the university. Let me read from Alan Rock, because I know he's being dragged into this. Let me quote Alan Rock, who was cross-examined. The lawyer said, "You said you made the decision to fund. You said yes. Was there no cap established in terms of funding?" Alan Rock, "No." So Alan Rock basically said, "I will fund unlimited lawyers to crush this critic." Am I getting the facts right there?
That's right. And I can tell you as well that the University of Ottawa is known as the institution that is the most misbehaved in terms of access to information in Ontario. And so the university is fighting tooth and nail to prevent the information from being released publicly about how much money they're spending on this lawsuit. We estimated $1 million last August. That's before trial, and it's been a long time since then. A lot of money is being racked up, student tuition money and public taxpayer money. And the university is fighting very hard to prevent that from being released publicly, how much that is.
Gee, it's almost like he's still a Liberal cabinet minister, but this time he doesn't have to answer anyone in question period. Joseph, I appreciate you coming on the show. Please do keep us posted. Is this trial ongoing right now?
It's ongoing right now. As you may know, there's an interesting development, which is that the defendant walked out of the trial, stated that he could not participate in the trial. And so it's continuing now in the absence of the defendant before the jury.
Jeez, that's crazy. Joseph, thanks for being here and bringing us more crazy news from U of O.